up on 6 years now that we've been going live, and there's 1,000 episodes, I guess, of this podcast that have run. And as you guys know, I let you guys lead wherever the podcast goes. So your questions generate where we go when we're talking about financial independence, real estate, what's been going on in the week up and since last week. So a couple of big updates. Google crushed beating expectations. Of course, so did Meta just now. So Facebook crushed expectations. Got Microsoft crushing expectations. So tech is actually, there feels like there's an energy that wants to push things down, but pretty much every company so far that's been reporting this earnings season has been reporting positively. Now, what does that mean for real estate? What does that mean for your portfolio? Well, if revenues are up and profits are up, that means inflation isn't coming down. It means they're passing on and businesses are paying it and people, consumers, are paying it. So it's scary, I think, in some ways, to see a really good earnings season. We were kind of hoping for a bad earnings season so that rates would come down sooner, because again, rates being this high will eventually lead to business and real estate depression, or sort of a really bad season, so to speak, in real estate up and coming if rates stay high for long. And the narrative that they're going to come back down as soon as the next meeting upcoming in the next, people are even saying by May, by June, I was hearing about the summer, rates would be on their way down. I don't think that's the case unless something major breaks. Banking system has to break, bad earnings, obviously seeing, I think inflation may come down to like 4%, but breaking back to the 2% target, they need to keep the interest rates higher than the inflation rate significantly. So if right now the target's say 5%, 4%, they need to keep rates at 6, right? To keep things moving downward. They need that pressure, that pain. And so that's what's going on in the world is lately, if you haven't been following the market news, that's a big development. Other things like in the tech space, we're seeing crypto start to come back a little bit year to date, up 80% or so year to date. I still think it's a bear market rally, so to speak. So I don't think we're out of the crypto winter so far yet. I think there's still more pain potentially to come. So don't feel like you're missing out on the world if you haven't bought Bitcoin yet, if you haven't got back into the S&P 500, if you haven't got back into the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ's had a really big run. It was up 23% on the year to date. That's pulled back now to around 16%, 16%. And I think we're going to see a bit more pullback in the coming quarter, I think. But we could end up this year in the green. And I think next year even more so. So I'm continuing to buy quality stocks that I like, buy the index, diversify. As you guys know, the secret, like the ultimate secret that I was making this video about, is my catchphrase that I say at the end of every single episode. I'm going to dive into it a bit more this episode, but I think that, and by the way, if you have any questions, obviously throw them down below. You guys know anything real estate, stocks, personal finance, you guys lead the Q&A here. So if you have any burning questions that you want to ask, throw them down below. I'm always happy to answer, off the cuff. So I think the secret that most people are missing today anyway is the ability to branch out and have different sources of income. That's the main fail point that I see. Coupled with, at the exact same time, probably more important than this other point I just made, is that the spending. People are spending themselves out of their retirement, out of their financial future, and they're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So they're really not focused on, they're focused too much on the now and not enough on the future. They're enjoying that really nice sushi dinner now. They're going on that lavish vacation now. They're buying more car than they need, more house than they need. And I think house is probably one of the only things that you can make an argument for buying more of, only because, especially in Canada, but in most countries in the world, you get a tax-free exemption on your primary residence. I've made millions tax-free on my primary residences over the last 12 years. And it's because you can, in Canada anyway, you can buy a house for $500,000. If over a 10-year period it appreciates from $500,000 to $1.5 million, that's $1 million capital gain, completely tax-free, cash in your pocket. That's super, super powerful. And I think that, a lot of people don't factor that into their financial plan. It's more powerful than a tax-free savings account. It's more powerful than an RRSP. It is the most important tax vehicle we have in Canada because it's unlimited. You can buy a house for $2 million. Even if you're upper middle class, you can buy a $2 million house that appreciates to $5 million over a number of years in, say, Toronto. Maybe you improve it, you stage it up really nice, you paint it, you modernize it, you landscape it, whatever. Over the time you own it, you make the asset better. All of that gain, every dollar you put into that, if it has a 200% yield, which there are certain renovations I talk about ad nauseum in a lot of my other videos when I started making all those free videos about how to renovate well, and you can go back in the archive and watch all of those. But Those types of strategic improvements to your primary residence are a tax-free 100% cash in your pocket. So if you invest $10,000 in a new kitchen and your property's worth $30,000 more, you just made a 300% return tax-free. You do that on the lending side, let's say you or even on the income side, you invest $100,000 or $10,000 in your business and it makes $30,000. You have a $20,000 profit, 10,000 of that in Canada, 54% of that goes to tax. Even if you have it inside a corporation, by the time you draw it out to your personal name, you'll pay 54% tax. There's no real way around it. You get a credit for the corporate tax you paid, but again, on the personal side, you're going to pay the difference in tax. So you end up paying 54%, but it's not just 54% because we're at tax time. Let's talk about tax. You've got, your sales tax of 13%, your HST harmonized sales tax. You got your property taxes. They're going to tax your gas. Our gas is taxed at 30%. You've got your tax on everything all along the way. You get your tax for your driver's license, your tax for your license, your vehicle registration. You get your taxes on, when you sell land or you buy land, there's a land transfer tax. There's just so many taxes, 10 ways to Sunday. You're taxed out the ass, and it's just the primary residence tax-free vehicle is super powerful. I think a lot of people underestimate its power. Between us, like even if you were going to rent a place, still have a primary residence and rent the place as an office. You know what I mean? Like if you had a house in the city and you're like, I like to be in the city, fine. Rent an apartment in downtown Toronto or wherever in the major metropolitan for $2,000 a month. A condo would probably sell for $700,000 that's renting for $2,000 a month. So you could never own it for the cost of renting. It's way cheaper to rent in a major metropolitan. And then go and own a house in the suburbs. Maybe even you rent it out to family. Maybe you have family stay there. But it's a tax-free vehicle if you're occupying it. So occupy it, and then maybe during the week you can live in that house and still have an office that you commute to. You know what I mean? Like so many people could be using the primary residence exemption that aren't. More than half of Canadians don't use it. So that's low-hanging fruit to me. We should all be grabbing that. That is the secret. But really comes down to cost management. I think that people aren't typically spending on buying a quality asset, because if you could make the argument to buy a quality house and that could pay off in the long term. Buying too much car, buying too new of a car, buying too nice of a car, not worth it. I've never owned a car newer than 7 years old. And you guys know I could easily afford a new car. Right? I can even afford a 3-year-old car or a 2-year-old car. I ride the depreciation curve. And my vehicle's fine. Like I have a 2015 Honda Odyssey and I've beaten the hell out of it, getting material runs and driving it to Florida and back. And it's, I guess, coming up on 8 years old now. And it has 83,000 kilometers. I bought it at 50,000 kilometers. So I put 33,000 kilometers on it in less than a year. I drive a lot because of Florida. And because I pretty much use the van just for business. If I want to go somewhere, I get on my bicycle and I bike there. I'm a cycler. And I can get to everything I need close to my house, wherever I am. So I really only drive for business. So that's me. I don't even see the need for a car, really. But I mean, it's as a family with kids, I need to get them places sometimes. It does make sense to have a car. And I run a business, so I need a vehicle. But I don't understand the logistics of having 2 vehicles. I really don't. There's always been a way. My wife and I would always find a way to carpool with an employee, or we'd carpool together, a coworker. There's always a way to do it without having multiple vehicles. So as a family of 5, we split not including my dog, we split 0.2 vehicles per person. Some families are a couple with 3 cars. And I'm like, wait, you have 1.5 cars a person? I know people who have 2 cars who are just single individuals. And I'm like, well, and again, if you're making great money, if you have a great income and you're within your saving rates, fine. Like that's no big deal. That's not really a problem. I think the problem is when you're making $50,000 a year and you're doing that. If you're making $250,000 a year, you have a great income, you have lots of assets, okay. Like again, if you make $1 million a year and you spend $100,000 a year, that's frugal. That's hella frugal. People are like, whoa, Mike, like, I can't believe you're spending so much going to, you run on trips and you live in a really nice house and all this. And I'm like, look, compared to my income, I'm still super frugal. It's just that my income has continued to snowball and grow. And in the beginning of the journey, it's going to suck. You got to live like a student. And that's what I'm telling you is the secret. It's like starting humble, starting frugally. And as it builds, your life gets better. And, psychologically speaking, on the hedonic treadmill, right? Humans adapt. Hedonic adaptation is the idea that over time we adjust to any climate. And if you start at the top and you take away from a human, it psychologically messes us up. It's really bad. We don't adjust well with falling in social status and falling in material enjoyment. But once you've adjusted, the beautiful thing is the human adjusts. And once we've adjusted, there's not that big of a difference in measurement of happiness. So once you've got your basic needs met, your food, your shelter, it doesn't really matter if you live in a 1-bedroom apartment or a 4-bedroom apartment, or you live in a mansion, or you drive a Honda Civic, or you drive a Lambo. There's not a huge difference. There's a little bit of incremental difference in happiness. And the studies show actually, if what you do is like you rent a car, once a month or once a quarter, every couple of months, and you drive it for the day, you get a way bigger blip of happiness if you return back to a lesser vehicle than if you just had that, Bugatti all year round. So the happiness is actually better. It's better if you just like go and indulge every so often, right? It's just something to think about, guys. All right, let's do some Q&A here real quick. Hey, how you doing, Port City? First, welcome. You are first today. Debt is going to crush even more with inflation rates going up. So actually, inflation is really, it kind of eats debt. So debt is exactly what you want in these times. People are afraid of debt, but now's the time to lever up. We are in a recession in real estate. Prices are falling. This is the time to be buying. Most people wait until prices are rising, and that's when they get in. It's actually time to buy is during the deceleration, during the fall, because we can't predict the bottom, so we got to just keep buying the dips all along the way. Don't deploy all our cash, but slowly, deploy the cash and turn the asset around and then keep buying more of those said assets. We don't want to be sitting in cash right now because inflation will eat your lunch. And in a high interest rate environment, why are you not getting a great yield in your money? Don't be in cash right now. Being in cash is the stupidest thing you can do right now. I will argue, I'm happy to take that debate on. You want debt because when you can borrow right now, let's say in Canada now, the rates have fallen to the point where like our 5-year mortgages are in the 4% range now, 4 point something for a first time buyer residential. You're like high 4s for a 4 or 5 year fixed term. So our prime is at 6.7%. So on your variables, you're getting crushed right now. But your 2-year fix is a sweet spot right now. You can get a 2-year fix in the 5s. And then by the time that term is done, probably rates will be lower than the 5s. So you'll be able to refinance out. So I'm of the opinion that a 2-year fix is your optimal debt structured vehicle right now. But you could ride out variable. I have some variable rate products that I'm riding out right now at prime 6.7. I think over a 5-year term, my TCO or total cost of ownership of that debt will be a win on the variable. But it won't be down as quick as we think, but it will come down. Rates can't stay this high for very long. The banking sector will eventually collapse. Into next year, rates are coming down. There's a lot of a lot of bulls who are telling me that rates will be coming down now in 2023. And in 2022, I was saying to all those realtors and all those bulls, I'm like, look, I want real estate to rip. I want rates to come down as much as you guys do, but I'm not delirious enough to let my bias cloud my judgment. And looking at the data, in historical past, it takes years to bring down sticky inflation, especially because things like minimum wage go up, unions fight for higher wages. You get a price wage spiral. That's happening right now. They're passing on prices and people are accepting it. And salaries are rising at the same time. And that's going to make going back to where prices were before impossible. And then so decelerating inflation is going to take time. Disinflation is going to take time. And I said it's a 2-year journey. We're looking at 2024. So the pain, the maximum low point is probably coming this December, January. It could go on for longer, who knows? But the most likely scenario right now, the highest probability is that rates stay high for 2022 and all of 2023, a full 2 years. And in 2024, we start to decelerate. Into 2025, we should start seeing those low rates. If they lower rates too early or they stimulate too hard, this becomes a teeter-totter up and down battle that can last into 2027. So that's something that we don't want to happen. I think the Fed is serious. I like the language they've been using at the last few meetings. They aren't going to be easing up. The bond market thinks that they are, but I think the bond market's wrong. The bond market had its worst performing year last year. They were completely wrong, got eviscerated by the rates going from nothing to really, really high, the fastest we've seen in ever. It was the fastest acceleration of rates ever. And the bond market got destroyed. Most people in bonds, they were levered in bonds. That's why the banking crisis is happening right now. It's because they have treasury bills that they need to liquidate to get cash, and they can't without taking massive losses. So that is what it is. That's the reality of the bond market being wrong on occasion. But yeah, I forget what the point I was making on that, but debt. Oh, I think I was talking about the debt or something. Debt is going to crush. No, so debt is actually really great when you tie it to a cash flowing asset. A lot of people are buying cars and they're buying vacations and they're financing stuff. Don't do that. The stuff is going to be worth nothing and you'll have no underlying value on that asset. You just have a pile of debt. You don't want that. A car is going to be worth nothing in 10 years. But if you take that debt and you apply it to something like real estate, where you could borrow at 5% and the asset's producing a 10% yield. Every dollar you borrow gives you 100% markup on the cost of the debt. That's good. And then inflation is going to stay higher for longer. What that means is if inflation gets down to 4% or 3.5%, and you're paying 5% in debt, 3.5% of the entire loan balance is being forgiven every year. Do you understand that? So when rates get down to 3.5%, inflation might still be at 3%, you're effectively borrowing at nothing because the inflation is destroying the buying power at the cost of the interest they're charging you. So you're really not paying anything for that money. That inflation will pass on to those assets, and those assets will appreciate in value. And by the way, because you borrowed, you put 20% down, that's 4-to-1 levered. If the asset appreciates 4%, then you're 4-to-1 on that. You get a huge spread. You get a 12% yield on your overall down payment that you put up. So when the bank puts up most of the money and you put up a little bit of the money and that asset appreciates, the debt from the bank is fixed. Their ownership is fixed. So as the equity increases, your 20% down absorbs all that equity and shows, in some cases, a double in a year or two. And so that's where I think that your capital is best deployed, is against quality assets. You can lever up, quality dividend stocks right now at less than prime with interactive brokers. You can also get mortgages against stocks. That is a smart thing to do if you have a balanced portfolio. Don't do it against one stock. But if you have a really nice quality blue chip portfolio, you could borrow a 50% loan to value, 70% loan to value. Don't go all the way to 70%. Go 50 or 40%. Leave some room in case the market dips a little further. But then you can lever up and you can acquire quality assets that are going to appreciate a ton. Because remember, in years after bear market, years like we've seen, we may have another second bear year this year. I don't know how the year is going to close out in 2023. It's possible we have another down year, in which case 2024 and 2025 historically will have over 50% appreciation on the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 over the next 2 years following a recession. So we're going to have a huge rip. This is an opportunity to acquire debt and acquire assets on the cheap. I don't know if this is the bottom, but into the next dip, we're going to try to test the lows again. It's going to happen probably this summer, this fall. And when we test those lows, after people sell and man go away, that's a little term that the traders use and they go on vacations. But what I think is that we're going to test the lows. Whether we break through the lows, I don't know. We may have already bottomed, but we're going to have another dip. And during that next dip, it'd be a great time to buy. Using debt, you can acquire quality assets like businesses. I love to buy businesses. Real estate is like a business. You can buy, I treat each one like its own little business, but you can buy, 20-unit apartment building, and that's a business in and of itself. And where you can use debt against that business, put 25% down. I mean, you're talking about putting such little money down and getting great returns. If that building doubles over the next 5 years in value, you get that entire double. The bank gets none of that. They get a fixed return. And so that's where you can win really big with debt. Debt is a great thing, especially in high inflation times. So you want debt. Debt is your best friend when it's tied to assets that can service the debt for you. You don't want to be paying the debt off. The asset pays the debt off for you. So it's quality dividend stocks that produce cash flow that cover the interest payment. It's, quality businesses that produce great cash flow that cover the debt on the business for you and put money in your pocket and have room in case rates go higher. Same is true in real estate. We want to apply debt. That is the secret to getting rich. Like, that was what I was going to save this whole episode for, but I got into it a little early. I was going to save it for the end so people had to watch to the end, but that's the secret to being rich. Beyond the 3 levers, the real secret is leverage. You want to be leveraging other people's money, and specifically bank cheap money. That's where if you don't want to be borrowing high interest, that's dangerous. That can get really dangerous. And you're not buying quality assets, that can be dangerous. But if you use debt well, it can be really solid. So I'm going to jump to the bottom here real quick. Even though it wasn't a super chat, I'll give you priority because you were first today. You did say you were first up in the chat. So Port City, I'll give it to you. So what's the LTV on businesses? It depends. We bought a medical business in 2018 or 2019. Might have been early 2019. It took us a while for due diligence to get it done, but we were able to, within the first 6 months of owning it, we got bridge financing to close, and then we were able to refinance at 140% of what we bought it for. So we cleaned up the books, we did things nice, we waited for the final year end, brought that back to the bank, used the 2 previous years plus the new year that we had, and said, hey, come audit our bank account, see how cash flow positive this business is. And they gave us a loan that was more, we had now had more debt on the business we could access at prime than what we paid for the business. So that business paid us to buy it. Imagine buying, there are businesses out there, I've seen it, where you can buy a $10 million business for $2 million down. And then you refinance that business. It depends on the business, but in a lot of cases they'll lend, they don't lend on loan to value in the same way they do with real estate. It's more, a lot of the time they're looking at cash flow and serviceability. And when they lend, they'll lend at what they can secure. So do you have a building with the business? Do you have cash flows that they can secure against? What is the net operating income you can show? Inventory, they'll secure against inventory too. But basically you get a series of loans for inventory or advances to help grow. And in some cases, you can buy businesses with nothing down, especially within the first year. You can burr a business, and it's way more profitable than stock trading or and I love stock trading, and I'm having an amazing month, by the way. I'm up 9% this month in my Interactive Brokers using a zero DTE strategy. So I run neutral delta, meaning I'm not long and I'm not short. I close out to zero every day. So I'm trying not to be long or short. I straddle. And so I'll sell puts and I'll sell calls. I might buy puts and I might buy calls, but mostly I'm collecting theta. So theta is the idea that if you sell insurance in the morning, over time, if the price of the stock market doesn't change at all, you win big because there's time value depreciation on those insurance contracts. And if you're wrong, you have to buy the index because you agreed to insure their shares. So they'll give you their shares at the set price at a slight discount in the morning. So I sell that, and there's a big decay on zero DTE. So 0 days to expiry. So when I sell 0 days to expire, I'll sell it in the morning and it'll expire by the end of the day. I'll often at 3:55 log in too. And if I can see it's kind of flatline, I'll get in there and I'll sell, a bunch of puts that are worth 20 cents a piece. And they almost 99% of the time they expire worthless. 1% of the time. So I get it works out to a 10% annual yield, but in a minute. And sometimes I have to buy the index. Next morning I just sell it again. I sell covered calls on it, and it got to go deep in the money. And they called them away the next day. So I have to use margin to do it, but it can be a lower risk strategy if you risk manage properly. I'm using that strategy right now, and I'm up. If I can keep this strategy going, I'm going to be doing 100% annualized, which again I know that's not sustainable, and beating the market over the long term is very difficult. But I'm having fun with it and investing the time into it recently, and it's been paying off really well this month. But anyway, back to buying businesses, back to buying real estate. Leverage is your best friend. Buying businesses is how businesses is pretty much how all 99% of all the billionaires did it. They didn't do it through real estate. There are people who have built businesses in real estate like Grant Cardone has done, but it's not just in passively holding property. It's a great way to become a millionaire, maybe even a multimillionaire, but it's not a great way to get to billionaire. You need to own businesses. So as your wealth grows over time, you need to either build businesses within real estate or buy businesses or build businesses. You need a business in your life, multiple businesses in your life. And if you can't, you can invest in other people's businesses. If you don't want to, fine, you can invest in other people's businesses. Even if they're publicly traded businesses, that's what stock investing is finding quality companies that you like, that are generating great cash flow, and buying a piece of that. Hey Mike, any tips for real estate investors you wish you had utilized sooner? Just reading this, Varun. I don't know. Tips I just gave you around leverage. I wished I had, more carefully levered. I think it would have been smart if I applied more debt. And I kind of wish, I kind of wish that I would have bought more. That's the biggest regret. Why didn't I do more deals? I was afraid to dig on too much, too fast. And it's I could have easily just, taken on more deals and hired people to help me manage it. And I didn't grow fast enough. That's probably my only regret. You know what? I'll give you another tip. It was staying in the weeds. I was managing my own properties. I was my own property manager. I was my own contractor, laying floor, painting, fighting with tenants on the phone, going to the tribunal. I didn't hire a paralegal. I didn't outsource any of that. And that was my biggest failure. It slowed me down big time. I would be twice as rich today if I had outsourced sooner. In fact, I had investor friends who were like, man, you're so good at managing properties. Can you just do a property management company and manage my property? And I started managing other people's properties that I didn't even have a stake in for an 8% a month fee. What was I doing? It was $20 an hour work, $25 an hour at best. But I didn't know how to say no. And so that was something that early on in my career, I wished I had known how to say no and know my value. And that was something I didn't. It was good though, because I learned how to be a good property manager. And there's probably very few people who are better property managers than me. But I have to accept that, yes, I can take the best care of my property, that no one's gonna do a better job, but 80% is good enough. Same is true for, well, not same is true for construction. I can actually hire people that are better than me at construction and will do a better finish. So that's just something to like, what am I doing trying to do it myself? I should be focusing on acquisitions, financing, high level strategy. I can go find a deal and assign it for $100,000 profit and trade the paper. And I can pay for a whole team of construction guys to do what I never could in the same amount of time for the same amount of money. So that was a big epiphany for me. Next question was, Jeremy says, I'd be interested to hear your experience working with mortgage brokers. It seems like they push B lenders when I could qualify for A. Well, it depends on the mortgage brokers you're dealing with. There are lots of really shisty, horrible mortgage brokers. There are also some great mortgage brokers out there. A lot of them push to B because it's easier, Jeremy. So when they go to A lender, they have to provide proof of leases for every single unit, 90 days of rent deposits. There's a laundry list of things they're going to audit and ask for in the file. It takes a long time to build the file. And the financial institution pays them directly because there's no lender fees from the borrower. It's better for you. You want a lender, maybe. I can give you an example why you wouldn't want a lender. If you're at a point where I got to, where you had 10 or 15 or 20 properties, the amount of work to qualify for an A lender is probably 100 hours of back and forth and paperwork and all of that, and you still might not get approved. The richer you are, the harder it gets to qualify for A lender financing, especially in the residential space. Whereas a B lender, you might be able to call and send in a few documents and it's done. So it's easier for the broker and they get paid more. So the dollars per hour are way better. That's why brokers will pigeonhole you into B lenders. But it can be a win for you too, because it's not just their time that they're saving, it's your time that you're saving. And I often use 10% debt when I'm financing flips. So people, if you have money you want to park 10% right now, when I get flips, I have a list of people that I can call and I can borrow 10% and they fund the deal and it's done. And for me, that's a way better than going to the bank and paying 6 or 5 and having to go through them auditing all of my, it's not even that it's a big deal. Like I used to have a folder on my desktop. I got pretty efficient with it back in the time I was growing. I had a dozen, cheap 2% mortgages. I was good at getting financing when most people said no. I was able to find a yes. I got Scotiabank to give me 10 mortgages. Well, then I got BMO to give me a few TD, CIBC, some corporate stuff. So I was able to get a lot of debt together, but it was a lot of work. Like my folder had, 3 years of tax returns in there, your NOAs, your, if you had T4s, you include those, every single lease for every single property. In my case, I would have to send 20 emails to the mortgage broker because the PDFs were so big. By the time I sent them my 90 days bank statements from all my bank accounts, my investment accounts, showing my proof of rent deposits for the last 90 days, and then tenancy agreements. The leases are 7 pages each, and I had like 50 leases. So every single one, and they have to check off and make sure that, and they look at the lease, oh, this lease expired. Can you go to the tenant, get them to sign a 3-pager that says there's still a tenant there? Like they're month to month. Of course, they're still paying rent. You can see they're depositing rent. Like, yeah, we don't trust that they're depositing the rent. Like, go get the tenant to sign something. That's part of A-lender financing. When you have a huge portfolio, that process is, if you don't have your systems down, you don't have a folder on your desktop with all those documents in it, even if you do, it's a lot of effort. And so that's why you go B-lender. That's why you go private mortgage, because the time. Like, if you're buying a property that needs to be transitioned to, sometimes A-lenders won't do it. If it's a distressed property that needs renovation or has a bad tenant in it, A-lenders might say, no, we don't want to touch it. So you got to buy it, stabilize it, clean it up, put a quality tenant in with if you're not going to flip the property, then you would take that private and you would get a first mortgage. Once you bought the property, fix it all up, you go for a big refinance and you pay out that private mortgage. And that's the process. It's way better than putting a A-lender on and then trying to refinance after you're done your BRRRR with an A-lender. And then you're in a situation where you're paying a 3-month interest penalty to discharge that A-lender mortgage. The fees on breaking an A-lender mortgage and putting a new one on are actually worse sometimes than just going and buying 10% open mortgage from someone. There's lots of people out there. Probably you're watching this right now and you want to make 10% return. There's lots of 10 to 12% out there that you can get. So anyway, it's there's definitely reasons why Jeremy will do that and why I do the same thing. It's just time. What is your time worth? My time's worth. The interest savings isn't always worth it if your time is very valuable. Jonathan said, what's up, Mike? Hope you and the family are well. Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, we're well. My 3 girls are doing amazingly. We had a great day today. Varun says, for someone who hasn't reached FIRE yet, how would you start to plan a potential move in Canada to Florida while working 9 to 5? So I'm not convinced that Florida's all that much better tax-wise than Canada. I'm just going to say that if you're a working individual. There's no state tax, but there's still like a 27% federal tax. You lose some of the cool programs that Canada has. I'm not entirely convinced that Florida's better, but there can be arguments made that you could do it. As far as like if you're not retired yet and you're just looking to make the move for other reasons, or you have a good job down there, it can make sense to relocate. It's a lot of effort and energy. I'm looking to set up a Bahamas structure. That would mean that I get to spend some time in the US, but I stay out of the US. I avoid the substantive presence test, which is 120 days in the US. So anything more than 120 days, you start having to pay tax in the US. You start having to worry about if you die, you have inheritance tax of 40% if you're a wealthy individual in the US. There's a whole bunch of things that are nasty in the US too. And Biden's made it so much worse. They've really made the tax system horrible in the United States. And so there's a lot of things that aren't good for Florida. I love it, by the way. Like culturally, it's fine in Florida. It's great being on the ocean. I will spend my winters there. I'm a tax resident in Canada right now, but I'm looking to relocate to the Bahamas in the coming years. Oh, look, I have a map here. Speaking of maps, you guys see that? See how close the Bahamas, that island of Freeport right there is to Florida? In fact, they almost look like they're touching on this map. That's because they're 60 miles apart. That's why the Bahamas is a choice over Dubai or other places. Is one, Bahamas has better structures. But two, I think that there's some distinct advantages to being close, being able to take your boat back and forth or your plane in 20 minutes back and forth to Florida and effectively live between Florida and the Bahamas when you're in the Bahamas. And then you could be spending 5 months here in Canada, tax-free, because again, you're not domiciling in Canada. You're still a resident of Canada. You could at any time move back and start paying tax and have healthcare again. That's the nice thing about Canada is you don't have to expatriate. You can just come back anytime you want. Canada's got its arms wide open and happy to give you benefits again and collect. So having a Canadian passport is one of the best places to be born in the world. I argue it's one of my favorite passports because again, you can just leave anytime you want and stop paying tax. The US sucks. Like once you have a US once you have a US passport, you're so limited. You're paying tax there for the rest of your life. You got to renounce to get away. So I would never ever want a US passport. If someone offered it to me, I would say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in that. That's just me. I can't see any really good benefits of having one. You're not liked anymore. You can't go any special places that you can't with a Canadian passport. So I would take Canadian passport all day. And if something ever happens, you go back to Canada and you get free handouts. Like you could do nothing and play World of Warcraft and get $2,000 a month, live in Canada. If you have kids, you can collect $6,000, $7,000 a month. They give you $650 cash in your account, tax-free. If you have 5, 6 kids, you come here, you're an immigrant or a refugee, you come here in Canada, and you have like 5, 6 kids, and you work under the table, driving a taxi, you're doing construction work, or doing something under the table for cash, you can collect a ton of money. You can even work on the table. And if you keep your income below $30,000, the government claws back zero. Every dollar after $30,000, you make nothing. So there's zero incentive in Canada to make more than $30,000 if you have kids. Because the clawback works out to with the tax rate plus they take away the child benefit they would have given you, cash, tax-free every month. When they take that away, plus you add the tax rate in, you get to have about 18% of what you earn. The rest is completely clawbacks and tax. So why would you work? You wouldn't. If you're a refugee who comes here with a bunch of kids, or you're anyone in Canada who has a bunch of kids, you wouldn't work. You'd set up a corporation, you shelter that income. Because if you claim personal income, it sucks. Like I gotta get my income back down to zero so I can collect that child benefit again. I'm unfortunately paying a ton in personal income, but next year I could hide everything inside my corporations and I could actually get it to the point where I have almost no income. And yeah, I could collect Canada child benefit for my 3 kids, which is almost $2,000 a month cash, which is the equivalent of like $4,000 a month pre-tax a month. That's how messed up Canada is. It's got its priorities super weird. But anyway, my point is if you had cancer or something, just come back to Canada. Keep your passport, come back to Canada, and free healthcare. Start paying tax here. And so, Canada's a messed up but beautiful country. Has a beautiful topography, so much natural resources, a really great immigration plan. It's going to be a great country for the foreseeable future. It's just under really bad management, some really bad policy decisions. So that's my take on Canada. Okay, next question. Hi, Mike. How many quotes do you get from different contractors before you decide to pick one? Thanks for hosting. Hey, Gurinder, no problem. Happy to help. I like to do 3 for everything that I do. So 2 to 3 contractors, but I screen them before they come. So I feel them out. I'm like, hey, if you had to do I know you don't do hourly jobs, but if you had to do hourly price, would $50 an hour make sense to you? And the contractors that say no to that, I usually don't even bring in because their quote's going to be way too high. I find the ones who say, yeah, I work for $40 an hour. Then I bring them in and get a quote because that person is going to quote me in a reasonable price range. And I get 3 of those people and I look for the price discrepancy. What you're looking for is someone to underprice it, or you're looking for someone who, you can't go someone who's fair, give you a fair price to, because they'll do good quality work. That's what you want. The variance is huge. Like in Florida, I had 5 contractors come out to quote a bathroom. One was $600. One was $9,000. One was like $3,000. One was like $2,500. I went with the $2,500 guy. The $600 guy, I actually tried him out for a day. I was like, let me try you out and see how you are, because that's really cheap. And he was like it was degenerate. So you get what you pay for sometimes, but it's just not true in general. People believe that, like, paying $9,000, you're gonna get a better quality job. And it's like, not necessarily. That $3,000 job might be just as good. And for resale perspective, the $9,000 and $3,000 job, almost no difference. So the extra $6,000 you're spending is just a loss in profit. And that's where real estate is a business. And a lot of people aren't good business people. They get taken. And that's where I don't. I like to negotiate. I don't mind fighting. The conflict is healthy, and negotiation is a healthy part of the business. So that's, you have to know your prices. And if you don't know your prices, get lots of contractors to come in. I already know my prices. So when someone comes in and says $9,000, I'm like, okay, thank you. Thanks for the quote. Appreciate it. But like, you can't pay that and make money. It's like, you can't go hire a new builder to build you a house and make money. That isn't a way you make money in real estate. You end up with an at market price. The builder makes all the profit. What you want to do, and same with hiring a general contractor that's going to manage all the sub trades for you, it's hard to make money with that. What you want to do is hire sub trades. So you want to hire someone who does flooring. You want to hire another person who does painting. You want to hire a different person that's plumbing on the side. And by hiring those different sub trades, you get to collect the 30% markup as the general contractor, especially when you're getting started. And then as you scale, you hire someone to be in that role. That's your property manager that is also your general contractor. So there you go. Port City says, I got a 3-unit under contract in a C area. Ouch. Only needs cosmetic updates, siding, paint, new windows, done by the previous seller. Why do you not buy in C areas? So the reason I don't buy in C areas is, one, and I used to buy in C areas. I had lots of properties in A, B, and C areas. And the thing with C areas that I noticed was, in the C neighborhoods, your number of police calls, your number of tenant delinquencies, your number of damage reports, all of that was just way higher. I was always dealing with roaches and bed bugs and tenant conflict. And when one tenant stabs another tenant, it was very common. Or I put a good tenant in and the neighbor stabs that tenant. That happened, actually, once at a property. You can't change your neighbors. So in a C neighborhood, you're dealing with scum. A C or a D neighborhood, you're dealing with mostly people who are poor. And unfortunately, poverty directly correlates with crime and directly correlates with drama. So there's always a story why they can't pay rent, and they loop you into their drama. And I can be a very empathetic person, and so I want to help. And so when the single mom calls me and she can't make rent with her 2 kids, I want to help them find a plan. So I'm on the phone for hours. I'm laying in bed thinking about ways to help make their life better. And it's just not a good use of my constructive energy. I just feel horrible trying to run that business well. There are people I know who run really great C and D class rental portfolios, and they make great money, and they're in the slummy areas of the city, and they have a great price per unit, and they do make cash flow. But you're dealing with a lot of deferred maintenance. You're dealing with a lot of like hackery. The buildings tend to be put together with a lot of hackery because poorer people had to own them, and they didn't do as good of a job keeping them up and or building them as well. They tend to cut more corners. And then also, when there's not a lot of, like when tenants don't pay well, then there's just not a lot of money to invest in the building. So previous owners tended to defer the maintenance, which causes problems. And just in general, the clientele you're dealing with is just a lower quality. You're dealing with more landlord-tenant board. My A-class properties, I've never been to landlord-tenant board. On my A-class properties, never been ever. Never had a tenant that didn't pay from an A-class quality property, because an A-quality property, I could find a really great tenant that makes 90 grand a year, that has a great credit score and has assets. And they can't afford the time to fight with you. Whereas the C-class tenant makes $15 an hour, and it's worth their time to try to fight with you over things. It's just just the quality of business. If you can buy a C rental and put in a nice, good property manager who's going to really grind it, who doesn't mind putting the extra hours, it's 3 times as much effort to manage a C quality building versus an A plus quality building. So it's just time. If your time isn't that valuable, or you can find a manager and you're able to make cash flow on it, on the surface, the C and D class buildings look like they generate more, but the A class buildings hold their value better, appreciate better, and generate better return on time. And just in general, I feel better owning that type of asset, just a quality asset versus, it's like junk bonds. You can make great money in junk bonds, but wouldn't you feel better owning quality bonds that have a lower risk? I've had a C-class portfolio and I've done it and I've grinded it, and I'm that cheap, frugal guy who can make that portfolio cash flow and really make the money, but is it worth it? And for me, it just wasn't worth it at the end of the day. And sometimes on some of the properties, all that extra cash you get, you give back on a tenant move out when they leave all their shit everywhere. And you got a dumpster there and you're dumping out all the crap that they left behind. Whereas in the A-class tenant, they're like, hey, I brought pest control in and I had cleaners come. I was embarrassed with my mess. It's like, that's the difference in the tenant that can't even afford to get their shit out of the unit when they move out. They leave everything behind versus the A-class quality tenant. You can't take the A-class quality tenant and put them in a C building. Even if you improve the C building, you make it really, really nice tile, you fix it up, you over renovate for the area, you can't put that A-plus quality tenant in that building. They won't live in that area. Maybe there's a few exceptions to that rule where you can, but by and large, you can't. And so you deal with a lower quality and you attract that. So that's the cons, I guess, for that strategy of buying the crappier properties that are a lower price per unit, lower price per square foot. Maybe they're in a gentrifying neighborhood. Maybe I wouldn't have no problem buying in a B- that's in a or buying the worst property in a great area. I buy a C shitty building that's like a C building in a B+ area all day, and I'll improve it and I'll make it like all the rest of the houses on the street. That's a great play. But buying a B-class building that's nice inside and decent, but in a really crappy area, look, the thing with real estate is location, location, location. It's got to have a good quality property, in my opinion. The dirt is super important. So there you go. There's my 2 cents. Bum, 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 bum. David says, hello again from Alberta. What age homes do you like to purchase in Canada post 1979 to avoid asbestosis? Thank you. And Alberta home inspection clauses are easy to get. So in any market where you've got not a lot of competition, there's not multiple offers on every property, you can put in a home inspection. So if you can, you should. But in the more competitive markets, you won't be able to. So my thoughts are this. In London, Ontario specifically, there are a lot of old buildings. Most of the buildings are old. And so most of the buildings that make any sense, price per unit, are old. I was stuck with only looking at mostly old stuff. So most of my portfolio was old. You can get buildings that don't have any asbestosis. Like this house I live in now is built in 72, and it has no asbestos in it at all. They were onto fiberglass and it's all good. So just because it's a certain age doesn't mean that it has those issues. You just have to know what you're looking for. Asbestos isn't that bad. Like, save a little asbestos for the rest of us, is what my contractor used to always say. It's actually not that bad. If you water it down with a spray bottle as you take off asbestos, I've been in attics with asbestos before without a mask. Should not have done this, but like I've done the cleanup. And if you get it wet, the fibers do not get airborne. You just spray them, keep it wet, and you have no issues. It's actually really not that hard to remove asbestos. But anyway, I did it once, but I've had a lot of contractors who have done that. And like, you should get a special hazmat team and all of this, but like, if you wet the fibers, that's the professional way that they do it. They seal it all in and they wet the fibers and they have special masks on. Put a good quality mask on, definitely, 100%. It's not that scary. It's only an issue if you disturb it too. So if you don't disturb it, it's a non-issue, right? So yeah, yes, we want to avoid those things if we can. But sometimes you can get a really good deal on a building because it has that issue, and it might cost $5,000, $10,000, where, it costs $3,000 to remove the little bit of asbestos tile or something that is on the side of the building or whatever, right? Like, in some cases it can make a lot of sense, or they'll give you a $50,000 discount to handle that issue. So sometimes it pays to deal with old buildings, and it pays well. In Florida, I only buy 1990 or newer. And that's because the building code changed there, and I want it to be hurricane proof. excluding large multi. Large multi was all built solid, big concrete. Basically in Florida, you want solid concrete, or you want to see the building's been updated recently. If I'm just buying a single family house, I'm looking for like 1990s or newer, always concrete block, never wood. There are a lot of wood houses in Florida. I just wouldn't touch it. I much would rather own a concrete block property. That's to say though, if I got a good enough deal on a property, I probably would still consider buying it and flipping it. But for a long-term buy and hold, concrete block, 100%. Try to get a metal roof on too, and you'll be good. Look for elevation levels too. Make sure you get a good elevation on the property so you don't have any flooding issues. Not right on the ocean either, because then you get destroyed by the salt and the storms. A little bit back from the ocean is ideal. Okay, next question was, Port City says, 83 Kims is nothing, it's brand new in my book. 83K, I don't even know what you're trying to say there, I'm confused. 83, oh, I remember, you're talking about my van. You can start, yeah, a Honda Odyssey can go 300,000 kilometers. So 83,000 is basically brand new. But I picked that van up super cheap, and it was older. I had a great deal on it. I think I bought it for like 23 grand, which at the time the going rate was in the 30,000 range. But 22, 23 grand for a Honda Odyssey, my most expensive vehicle ever. Before that, I always drove like Ford Focuses. I drove like a Mazda 5. I spent $2,000 to $8,000 on a vehicle, and I sold it for exactly what I bought it for 3 years later. I tend to buy my vehicles and sell them 2 to 3 years later for exactly what I bought them for. I'll probably sell this Honda Odyssey for exactly what I bought it for, hopefully. Other than like I'll have to put a new set of tires. I just put a new set of tires and brakes on it because again, going back and forth to Florida, I spent $1,200 on a new set of tires. I popped one of the tires in a construction site. I got a nail in it and it ruined the tire. That happened in Florida, so that sucked. That was a personal. I could have tried to argue his business, but like I just paid for it and called it a day. That kind of stuff happens in life. Like, sucks when you run over a nail, get a nail in your tire or whatever. Like, owning a car is not free. There's going to be some depreciation. There's going to be some, total cost of ownership, expenses for maintenance. It's part of it. You try to manage those and reduce those as best you possibly can. And that's what I do. Are you noticing a slowdown in your Canadian Airbnbs? Anything you're actively doing to stay competitive and booked? So Varun, I don't have a lot of Canadian Airbnbs left. So I don't have a great sample, but I do have a lot of friends who have a lot of properties, and I'm actively involved in discussions with them about what they're seeing in the competitive landscape. And I'll share, because I like to stay fresh and stay sharp on what's happening in the market. So I chat with a few people who I consider to be experts in this space, and that's how I stay fresh and what's going on. So specifically related to Airbnb, there's been a significant slowdown. When you look at the data, you're seeing there's a big slowdown in Airbnb. A further challenge is cities like London, Ontario have banned it entirely. You cannot have Airbnb properties in London unless it's your primary residence. So a lot of cities have just flat out banned it. And so that's a challenge too, is that like, it's not allowed. I will say there were too many Airbnbs that came online, and too many people, I think, got sold the dream of Airbnb re-rental, where you rent a house for $3,000 a month and they say, hey, I'm making $6,000 a month. Look how much profit I'm making, $3,000 a month. I don't even own the house. I'm just renting it from some landlord. If you track that over 3 years, and I have with people who've done this, what you see is that it looks like they're making $3,000 a month, but on the $6,000 they're making, 13% of it's going to HST off the bat, so they're really making like $5,200. Then they have cleaner fees that are probably $1,200, so they're making $4,000. And they have, if you have to hire management to actually run it for you, so it's passive, you have to hire staff to deal with all the problems, you're really making $3,500. Your rent's $3,000, and you've got furniture, which in many cases is 10 times the monthly rent. So rent's like $2,000 a month, you spend $20,000 furnishing the place. And that depreciates at a pretty rapid rate. And so you get another couple $100 a month in depreciation. A lot of these re-rental strategies don't end up paying off in the same way that they broadcast that they do. And the net income is a lot different than the gross. That said, in Florida, as an example, or in my cottages, as an example, when I compare Airbnb and I apply the furniture, I make a lot more and I have a lot more flexibility than if I did long-term rental. So it is more profitable than a long-term rental, but the re-rental strategies don't generate a ton. They generate a few $100 a month of property. You gotta have a huge portfolio of re-rentals to really make a really good net income. And for the people who are saying that, hey, I make great money on the re-rental, dig into the actual numbers. Look at the HST that they're paying. Look at the depreciation on the furniture. Look at the damages to the property, because after 2 or 3 years, the landlord's gonna expect you to repaint and clean up. Look at all the salaries, the manager, because you're paying, like, really market value is 15-20% to, the gross in just cost to manage, right? So there's another, $600 to $1,000 a month in cost as well. And as you get scale, maybe that gets a little bit cheaper per unit, but it's not a super profitable business to be in. And I almost got into it with a couple of friends, and we started something, and I started looking at the numbers, and I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't want to own an Airbnb property management business, and I don't want to own a re-rental business. I thought I did. I thought it would be great, but having dug into it, I quickly learned that the math doesn't make sense. And one of the things I subscribe to on this journey is, like, I pivot fast. When I see something isn't very profitable or isn't working well, I want to pivot right away. I want to be able to maximize my dollars per hour. I want to maximize my dollars per capital. So I think the re-rental business and the Airbnb business in this slowdown isn't a great business to be in. But I think that if you have a property where you're allowed to Airbnb it, it's a great pivot, because you have a property that looks mint all the time. You have nice quality photos. You ever want to sell it, refinance it, you get an appraiser in there quick. You can sell it, it's already ready to go. If you want to ever use the property, you've got access to it. You just have so much more flexibility in general to refinance, to sell it, to do whatever you want, and you're not locked into a tenant. If inflation runs at 10%, your bookings go up 10% automatically. So I like Airbnb for properties that it makes sense for. I would never buy a property that's just for Airbnb. I want it to be able to work as a long-term rental as well. If I have to pivot to long-term rental, does it cash flow? Can I rent? We're buying properties in Florida for $300,000. Our newest one was $298,000. Call it $30,000 or $40,000 in renovation, whatever. It can rent for $3,500 a month plus utilities. That's 1% rule. Now I can put on an Airbnb and it'll make $5,000 a month or more, and that's great. I can pivot either way. That's a win. That's the type of property that I wouldn't mind owning and throwing an Airbnb. You have that flexibility. It's a great type of return. Would I rent a house? Maybe if I had the logistics in place, it could make sense if you did a big portfolio of rentals. I don't think it's worth the dollars per hour for me. For some people it is, but there's a lot of risk there, and you don't own the underlying asset, which is kind of the scary thing. Your underlying asset in that type of business is your investment in salaries, which is worth nothing at liquidation value. Your investment in prepaid rent, again, nothing in liquidation value. Your investment in, furniture, which is worth maybe 30% or 40% of what you put into it. If you buy brand new, which a lot of these guys who do the rental strategies do, they go buy brand new. And if you're buying, I'm going buying used stuff and trying to find deals, 50% off, you can furnish a place if you shop sales, and it'll retain a lot of its value, maybe 80% of its value, but there's still a loss. When you invest in a property, you get a lift. So it's not a great asset. The re-rental businesses where you don't actually own the underlying building, not a great underlying asset if you have to liquidate. It just doesn't have a lot of real value. The value is in the leases, which can be terminated pretty easily. So your underlying asset in that business is not so great for selling it down the road and building real long-term wealth. Could it generate some cash flow? Yes. In the slow season, do you lose money? A lot of them do, yes. In the high season, when Airbnb is the busiest, so in Florida, that's the winter. Here in Canada, that's in the summer. But do they, I don't know. Throughout the whole year, yes, they can make cash flow. It can be a good business. But my analysis on it was that there are better businesses where you can make more money. I could have 10 houses that I re-rental, or I could do one flip and make the same amount of money. I've done flips where I made $250,000 on the flip. So it's that's more than net than I know guys who have 20 or 30 Airbnb re-rentals, and I make more on one flip net. So it's it looks great because they're making big, high gross numbers, but they have a lot of real expenses in an Airbnb re-rental business. And rent is only half the picture. Rent is significant, but it's half the picture. So anyway, I don't want to poo-poo on that business because there are people who do it and do it well and make great money. So I don't want to shit on the business, but it didn't make sense to me when I looked at it. And I have people come to me and ask me to finance the rent and the furniture, and I look at the numbers and I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. The ROI is bad. If I'm JVing with someone on that, I ran the numbers and it just didn't make sense for me. And I've been approached by lots of people, good operators too. Okay, next question. I'm scrolling down here. So, hey Mike, I have 2 houses under contract as state. I'm 25 and I have 50,000 in cash right now. Would it be smart to use all my capital to buy and fix up the properties? These would be Section 8. They should cash flow 800 each. Or should I buy one and have extra cash reserves? Again, there's a lot to look into with that, but probably some leverage wouldn't hurt. If you can get cheap debt right now and buy more of them, I always feel better owning 5 houses at 20% down than 1 house in cash. But I've been saying this for 5 years, and it's starting to catch on. I seen a video on Instagram of someone else sharing the 1 versus 5, and I was like, oh wow, someone's actually taken my idea and run with it. But I did a video on that like 6 years ago, and I was like, look, like people wanted a simple answer of how you explain leverage, and I just break it down to this. I'm like, would you rather own 1 property in cash or 5 properties, 20% down each? Always 5 properties, 20% down. You'll make way more money. Each property will cash flow a lot more than 1 paid off outright. So definitely you want debt. If that answer is not true and the 5 properties don't cash flow more, you're buying the wrong kind of properties. Maybe in like downtown metropolitans where it doesn't cash flow. You don't even want to own those properties in general. So when people give me those exceptions to the rule, they say, hey, like in LA or in Vancouver or like in Toronto, this isn't true. I'm like, you need to own in cash for it to make sense. I'm like, then don't own it. If it only makes sense owning it in cash, don't own the asset. The only time I own in cash is when I'm flipping or repositioning an asset. So I will often buy in cash and then throw a mortgage on. Because when you buy an asset that's undervalued, the bank doesn't see the full value of it because you haven't unlocked that value. So during the stabilization period, you need to own it in cash or a private, but cash. And then you go and refinance it and you buy more. That's what we do in real estate. And hopefully when you refinance it, what's left in the building, the 20% or 30% equity that you leave behind, that's created equity. Very little of your own money should be trapped in that property. That's the goal. And if it isn't cash flow positive after that, not great. So, yeah. What's the LTV on businesses? Again, it varies. Some businesses 50% loan to value. It's often based on net operating income and a multiple of EBITDA. So earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. B says, on average, does dividend growth portfolio beat an index fund portfolio over multiple decades in total return? It depends on the period that you start and end with. In general, it shouldn't, but depends on which dates you cherry pick. So depending when you pick, it can. I think a dividend portfolio is better because, for me, it's better because I can take the dividends and I can use them to generate cash flow that I can use to live and to service debt. And best of all, when I lever up and I apply debt to that type of stock portfolio, that type of stock portfolio typically generates more than the cost of the debt. Whereas if I'm buying tech stocks or something that doesn't provide a dividend or a strong enough dividend, I may be coming out of pocket every month to cover the interest cost on the mortgage attached to those stocks. So I like a dividend. I don't like to lever up unless it's dividend portfolio or for a short-term trade where I have a risk management plan in place and it's like I'm in, I'm out, I have insurance on that stock portfolio. It's a more complicated strategy. Most people watching this probably would just use debt for businesses and for real estate. DC says, what is the minimum payment on the margin borrowed in IBKR? Minimum payment? Can you take it as a cash advance to your personal account and use it as down payment? Yes, you can. Do they report to the credit bureau? No, they don't at all. Doesn't show up at all. If $1 million in stocks, they'll Interactive Brokers, and they're all blue chip stocks. Interactive Brokers will give you a $700,000 line of credit automatically. There's not even an application. They'll just basically let you take out your own cash. What they're doing is giving you your own cash back, and they're margining the stock that you have left in the brokerage. So really, you're just withdrawing your own cash out, if that makes sense. And then the leverage is applied to the stocks that you have in the portfolio. But yes, it's great because it doesn't show up in your credit bureau, doesn't affect your debt ratios at all. So it's a great thing. SJ says, hey, Mike, any take on how the upcoming commercial real estate crash might affect real estate market? In general, I think that commercial real estate, specifically office buildings and plazas and more industrial stuff, less industrial stuff, more office space, commercial and retail commercial is going to suffer. There's a trend towards working at home. There's a trend towards not selling online, not having brick and mortar. So I think there's less and less of that space that's needed, and we'll start converting some of that into residential. Again, because immigration is such that there's just not enough available housing, and we need that to free up that square footage to become residential. In general, there'll be pain in the market as a lot of these big buildings that were reliant on, and mostly in the major metropolitans, like larger commercial stuff, residential commercial stuff, you're super safe. Like there's always someone to rent a property. There shouldn't be a high vacancy rate. If you're investing in a market with high vacancy rate, be careful. Find markets that don't have high vacancy rates. You want places that rent quick and easy, where everyone's looking for something like it'll rent like that. That's where you want to buy larger commercial residential or short-term rental stuff is where you have good vacancy rates. So not high vacancy, low vacancy. And I think it's important in those environments to make sure you buy a building that will cash flow. If you're gonna buy it as a hotel, could it also cash flow as a long-term rental? Does it have other positions or plays that will work for it as well? That's why if I'm gonna buy hotels, I buy them with kitchens in them so they can be apartments. I just rent them out long-term if I want to. I wanna have that backfall, that pivot. That's just the way that I like to invest. It's just having multiple exit strategies and options. In general, I think that there may be some pullback on cap rates, but it's more than likely that the speculators will gob up the extra inventory that's going to pop up as these new buildings refinance at higher rates. The thing is, a lot of these buildings were bought years and years ago, and on average, their loan to value is low. And so they're not forced to sell. When their mortgage, they have a $5 million building and their mortgage is $2.5 million, they have a lot of equity there. So they can afford to hold for a while. And so it won't be like a distressed home seller who can't make their mortgage payments and has to default. There will be more inventory coming up on the market, and that should cause, I think, cap rates to rise a little bit. So prices will fall and cap rates will rise a little bit, but we're not going to see a massive catastrophe in the residential space. In the commercial space, maybe. In the office buildings, in the strip malls and stuff, we may have more of that because there's really bad trends there. But that's my thought on it. And by the way, I plan to buy more of that dip as it comes. So I will continue to buy distressed buildings, turn them around, and have enough of a lift that I'll be okay. So I continue to buy stuff at enough of a discount that it's okay, that I have the margin there to continue to hold through those times. But yeah, there may be some more pain coming up, and I'm excited for it because it's a time for me to be able to grow and expand. Whenever there's blood in the streets, you want to be greedy. Whenever everyone's greedy, you want to be fearful, right? That's the secret, is making sure that you're selective on the deals that you buy. In general, you want to always be selective on the deals that you buy and try to only buy businesses and properties, they're home runs. But yeah, be most fearful, I would say, when others are getting greedy. Marley says, what do you think is the best business to start in 2023? Again, it lines up with your passion. There is no one business that's better than another. I have a experience and a skill set in real estate. So for me, businesses that are somehow reliant on real estate, like wholesaling or flipping or just acquiring and putting together portfolios, all of those, buying and selling real estate, and those are businesses that I have a competitive advantage in and I have a big network in. I also have a lending business too that I've started earmarking capital for, Rosehart Capital. And Rosehart Capital funds deals for people too. So if you have any deals funded, reach out to me. I only fund in Ontario right now. I'm not funding anywhere else. I have no USD dollars, so don't come to me with USD deals. I can't afford to convert right now. The rates are just insane. But if you have a Canadian deal, I have Canadian cash in Ontario that I would put to work. Maybe in Alberta, I would fund a deal. Maybe the right deal. But I'm looking to fund either for equity, but I prefer fixed income, like just debt. I'm expensive, I'm not cheap. But yeah, I can be a good partner. So those are businesses I like. Jonathan says, if you were just starting your real estate business, would you buy real estate in the residence in the Bahamas, set up a corp there, and look for properties in Florida? Jonathan, I think that it depends. When you're getting started in your journey, Canadian real estate can provide a really great tax, and US real estate as well, can provide a really great tax shelter. When you buy a building, you get depreciation day one. You get a whole bunch of expenses. In years 1 and 2, your building usually is being stabilized. So you're just kicking tenants out, you have vacancies, you're renovating, you have high deferred maintenance, you're catching up because you bought the property for a discount. So during that first year or two, you have losses. Your return for each property is in a loss position in the first couple of years. So if you have a job making 200 grand a year right now, you're paying $100,000 a year in tax in Canada, go buy some real estate. Partner up with someone if you don't want to do the work yourself and get some real estate, because the loss carry forwards are insanely good. You get to deduct it dollar for dollar. If you put $100,000 in expenses on a property, you get to deduct that $100,000 in year one against your income. I paid no tax my first 3 years working in consulting. None. I sheltered all of it into real estate. And then now, this year, I'm selling properties that I had in 2016, 2015, 2017, all that. I'm selling those. And I'm in a position now where I'm paying capital gain on all of that. I'm recapturing some of it. But it's like, now capital gains are half tax free. So you're only paying half the tax. Your effective maximum tax rate is 25%. You get to delay that for years and years and let it compound and grow. Real estate, when you're just getting started, is a great tax shelter. You can use it to offset day job income. You can make 100 grand a year and pay no tax using a real estate portfolio in your personal name to offset all of your personal taxes from your day job. If you're paying tax on your T4s, you get it back tax time because of deductions. So I used to get fat returns back and use that to buy more properties. So real estate's really, when you're just getting started out, the shelter isn't important. The tax structure isn't important. Start buying properties in your personal name. It doesn't matter. Eventually get a corporation structure going, but in the beginning, it's actually better in your personal name because you have to deduct against your salaried job. And you can, in theory, in your beginning years, grow a really big capital base, tax deferred, tax free, but tax deferred in the beginning years. Later, you'll pay tax on it, but who cares because you already have a huge portfolio. So it's kicking the can down the road and optimizing. Paying $1 to someone 10 years from now is a lot less than $1, right? Because of inflation, it will eat away the tax man's liability that you'll eventually have to pay. So, yep. Offshore market, I mean, offshore is rough, but has cash flow. It's been beat up a lot, so there might be opportunity. I've heard 30% drops. Did you diversify into USD from Canadian? Been a rough time for Canadian. I do have some USD exposure. Again, like my S&P 500 companies, like my Meta, my Intel, all of that is USD currency. So some of my portfolio is USD. I do have some USD exposure, but not much. Not much. I'm mostly Canadian, unfortunately. And the stupid thing I did was my Interactive Brokers account is set up to automatically settle in Canadian. I should have made I should have made a separate Interactive Brokers account that settles only in USD, and it would have stayed in USD, and I would have had USD right now, and I didn't. So it's super stupid because USD is hella expensive to buy as a Canadian right now. It sucks. It just, in general, it sucks. I feel bad that I don't have more USD, but I think that we'll see that trend reverse. US dollars are going to depreciate a ton. Countries are cooing right now and saying, hey, we're done. Like, it's a coup. We're done with these demands. We're done with the US dollar being the petrodollar. There are 19 countries who have applied to join BRIC. China and Russia and India, they are the powerhouses. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, they're joining together to transact not in US dollars. That is going to come to a head. And I don't think the US dollar is going to do very well over the next year. I think we'll see a bit of a pullback. But again, the US dollar is powerful because it's backed by the strongest military in the world. And so will it go to zero? No. For the people who are out there like, oh my God, the US currency is going to collapse, it'll probably pull back a little bit over time, slowly. It'll be fine. Not going to collapse. But US real estate is some of the best real estate in the world to own. And regardless of how it performs, even if the US ends up like how England is now, like the UK now is was a superpower, but no longer. It's still a great place. People still invest there. It's still a great country. I think that will be how the US will be. They just won't maybe be the global dominant economic superpower because they don't have the population and a number of other things, right? But again, population might not be as important. There are other factors like AI that are coming into the space. And it's there's definitely labor inputs are not as important. When AI can do what 1 million people can do, having an extra 1 million people in your country isn't that valuable. It's actually dead weight in a lot of ways. So we'll see. I think the US is leading in the tech space. So for now, they have some competitive advantages that may bode well. All right, everyone, I have to go. Put my daughters to bed. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I really appreciate everyone who's here. If you have watched the stream or you're watching the replay, hit the thumbs up. If you have some value from this, please share it on social media. Take a clip, share it, tag me on Instagram. That would be really cool. For the super fans that are still watching, I've been doing this podcast for 6 years now. And I know I rehash a lot of the same topics and people get value from it, but some people say, I personally feel like I'm rehashing a lot of the same stuff with a new flavor. So there's like the current events, right? Whatever's happening currently in the market, that's what I give you on this channel. We discuss that. It's free live coaching. But if I don't start getting some great viewership on this channel, it makes it hard to want to keep doing these hour and 10-minute long streams. So it would mean a lot if you could share it for me, help it get some viewership. I don't keyword it. I don't do any of that. So I know I should do that. I know I should invest in the channel and I want to. It's just time, right? Where am I going to invest my time? And it hasn't been a priority, but if you're getting some value here and you're watching this, please share it around, hit the like button. It's like clapping after someone presents. It would mean a lot to me. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every single week, every single Wednesday. You know where to find me. You can also find me on social media at Mike Rosehart. It's a blue check mark on Facebook there. Go find me on Instagram, same thing, at Mike Rosehart, blue check mark. I earned the one on Facebook. I don't think you can even buy blue check mark on Facebook. I had to earn that through my accomplishments and accolades. I did buy the one on Instagram. And because I'm a Meta shareholder, I wanted to support. So I'm paying $20 a month for that. It also helps because I got a million messages from imposters and I'm sick and tired of people getting screwed. So that's why I bought it. I was tired of people sending me messages like 10 times a day saying, hey, Mike, there's a guy saying he's Mike Rosehart. And I'm like, now is a blue check mark. So you can't say that there isn't, which is, it's stupid that they made me pay for it because on Facebook, they gave it to me and they're the same company. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but spend less, earn more, maximize returns and the difference. See you guys next week.